Hello and welcome to Just Films and That. This is the podcast where we celebrate films we think might be underrated, underseen, or we perhaps just wanted to talk about them. I'm the host for this week, Josh Hallam, and I'm joined as ever by Alice Oliver. This week's film is Evita from 1996, so let's get stuck into it. Alice.
Hello, Josh.
Say hello to lovely people at home.
Hello, everybody. Lovely, lovely people at home.
Evita.
Mm-hmm.
Don't cry for me, Argentina.
See, you know already. You know the words. I bet he loved it. Listeners.
Spoiler warning if you haven't seen Evita or know anything about the real life story. Essentially, spoilers for real life. If you're reading a textbook about how the sort of 20th century went and you're up to this bit, we might spoil it for you.
Yes, stop listening now, but then come back and start listening again later.
Yeah. So, you picked this one, Alice.
I did.
So what's it about and why on earth did you pick it?
So, Evita follows the story of Eva Perón, who became the wife of Juan Perón, who was the president of Argentina, sort of 40s, kind of into the 50s sort of time. But it tells her life story and basically how she got there. So she starts off kind of very small town girl. She's part of the second family of this guy, of her father. You know, she's kind of not wanted. The film starts with her dad dying and you're not welcome at the funeral. You know, they get told to go away. So she learns very early on, life isn't fair. Things are going to be hard. So then she decides, right, well, I need to take charge of my own destiny. I need to make things happen for myself. So she wants to leave her small town and go to Buenos Aires, the Argentina Big Apple, to become a star. She starts starring on the radio. She's in plays. And then eventually she works her way up. She sort of socializes her way to the top where she finally meets Juan Perón. He's not the president at the time. He's just a soldier. As he calls himself, I'm just a soldier. Why would you be interested in me? But she is interested in him. She can see something in him. She knows where his story is going. And so she decides, I must be with this man. He is going to be my route to power, to fame, to glory, to all these things that she wants. She wants to make as good a life for herself as physically possible for her and her family. So it's all about her, you know, it's called Evita. She is the titular character and it's about this journey that she goes on. It is based on a true story. Some of the elements are slightly fabricated, you know, it's not all historically accurate. There's some talk about how some of the more negative aspects of Evita's personality were actually made up by Perón's enemies to try and discredit him and things like this. But she was very much a real woman. He very much a real man. They did get together. He was president of Argentina. She was the first lady of Argentina, and she did have quite an impact. Why? Sorry, go on, Josh. You look like you're going to say something.
Famously, of course, they weren't always singing as well.
Well, actually, no, they weren't. Sadly,
I'm not an expert, but as far as I know, they did talk as well as sing. Because, of course, it's like you said, it's based on a stage musical on a concept album by Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice.
Yes, it's Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice, who are a phenomenal duo. If you like musicals, these are the guys. They write brilliant songs. They construct excellent songs. So I absolutely love this film. I picked this because I think it's. At first, I just kind of wanted to see, like, what did this get? Rotten Tomatoes, IMDb. I think it's underrated. I also think it's a little bit underseen as well. I just don't think it's one that a lot of people have seen. And if you don't like musicals, you're probably not really going to go anywhere near this. It's directed by Alan Parker. So this is our second Alan Parker musical again, right? He's a musical guy because you chose The Commitments. That's also a brilliant film. So that's it. That's all there is to it. So, Josh, had you seen this one before?
I had not seen this one before.
No, I didn't think you had.
I had not. So you know, we've spoken in the past a little bit how I'm not a huge musical fan, which that's not really. It's not that it's not true. It's that there's certain types of musicals I avoid.
I see what you mean.
And this would probably be one of them. This sort of more classical, operatic
singing
musical
all the way through, like
singing. I don't like sing talking.
Okay, yeah, there's a lot of that in this film.
It irritates me.
Okay,
However, So I hadn't seen it before. So all I knew about it was that it was based on Eva Peron, obviously the true story. And I knew "Don't Cry for Me, Argentina" because it's a very, very famous song.
Yes.
And I wasn't, I'll admit I did not go into it with high hopes. Not. I knew it would probably be okay as a film, almost trying to be objective about it, but I wasn't looking forward to it from my own personal point of view. But I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would.
Oh, excellent. Oh, that's such good news. I'm so happy to hear it.
So, back to why you picked it. So, were you saying that it's sort of a mixture of I just wanted to talk about it, but also you think that it might be underrated and underseen?
I do believe it is underrated and underseen, and it's both those things really, probably in equal measure. I think it's a brilliant film. I did see this when I was very young, so again, I don't know, are you just more impressionable when you're a kid? Is there that touch of nostalgia to it? I don't know. But I loved this when I was a kid, and I have seen it like quite a lot. Like I'd probably seen it within the past 2 or 3 years. So, I knew what was coming kind of every step of the way. This is probably the first film where I was writing notes about things that were going to happen before it happened in the film. Because I was remembering it because I know it so well. I think it's absolutely brilliant. I love the story. I think you've got a great story here that packs a punch with a lot of various different themes as well. So you've got death, grief, survival, perseverance, and politics and war. It's got a very, very dramatic opening where you're at the funeral of Ava's dad, and she's very traumatized by the whole thing. It's not a very nice time. The family are all having a not very nice time. They can't grieve for their dad, for, this woman's husband, in the way that they would like to, because they are not welcome at this funeral. They are second-class citizens in the eyes of the people at this funeral because they are his second family.
Illegitimate children,
exactly.
Aren't
they are bastards,
which was a huge... Yeah, so so they're illegitimate, aren't they? Which is a huge thing at the time. And without going too much into it, but one of my family members who is around their age of when they were born is illegitimate, and it's a huge thing that still visibly affects that person when I speak to if it ever comes up. So it's strange. It's really it's not that long ago when you actually think about it, but. My the family member in question, they would talk about how they were born out of wedlock, and the father's wife would say things like, "Don't bring that in here."
Yeah,
it was the person as a child, and it's just like that's so dehumanizing, and it's not like it's 80 years ago. It's not that long ago, relatively speaking. So it's a huge thing. It's a very emotive subject. But anyway, as you're saying,
yeah, certainly, and very traumatic, especially when there's children involved. So Ava, she's already showing signs of being her own woman, of not playing by the rules. She runs into the church anyway, leaving her family and the primary family behind. She runs into the church and she goes up to her father's dead body to give him a kiss on the head, and then she gets dragged away, crying and screaming. And then you go bam into Ava's funeral. It starts with her death. It starts with so much death. Now imagine seeing that as a child. This had such a profound effect on me as a kid. I was sort of semi-traumatized by the whole thing. And that scene of her funeral it's just incredible. Like, it's huge. It's quite militant, but then also quite personal at the same time. It really does a good job of letting you understand the gravity of her as a person, what that meant to the people, what that meant to the state, to the country, whatever. And then you go right into this groovy song by Antonio Banderas as Shay. Oh, what a circus. Oh, what a show. And it just lightens the mood instantly. And I feel like throughout the film, you had a really great balance of these really quite sort of dark, serious, tense moments, but then balanced out by some quite fun, uplifting and hopeful songs. The whole point of Ava being in power is that she says she wants to make a difference. Whether she did or didn't, it's quite questionable. Some of the lines that Antonio Banderas' character, as the narrator, sings is like, oh, she didn't really do anything. It's like, what are we even celebrating for? So you get just a wonderful mix of themes throughout that are just conveyed so brilliantly in all the songs. Tell me what you thought of the songs. Did you love them? Did you have a favourite?
For me, the songs were probably the weakest part of it. Yeah, but there's such a range, darling.
I know,
but for me, I other than "Don't Cry for Me, Argentina" and the odd snippet of songs,
but that's
I don't
like the
really
worst one. "Don't Cry for Me, Argentina."
But I don't really remember any of them. Yeah, I don't.
Brilliant.
None of them particularly impacted on me.
Oh,
When I say it's
man.
when I say it's the worst part about the film, I don't mean I disliked
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
It just
yeah.
was
There
probably
was
the weaker
strengths
part about the
elsewhere.
film.
I see
But
what
there
you
was
mean.
lots of things I did like. But
Yeah.
some of the songs do work really well in the narrative. I just don't
Mm-hmm.
think they were for me particularly memorable or to my taste. But that doesn't mean I
Interesting.
didn't enjoy it. But I think back to what you're saying there, I really enjoy that non-linear narrative. So
Mm-hmm.
when they skip from the end of Eva's life to the beginning of Eva's life, and they do it with her husband as well, and with it starts. So it starts, doesn't it, with a cinema is showing a film, and then the guy cuts the film out and walks to the front and announces that she's died
Yeah.
because she was the first lady of Argentina, and she was actually referred to as the spiritual leader of
Yeah.
Argentina,
Yeah.
which is really a title that Juan Perón gave her. I think
Mm.
as it's not like I don't think it's an official title, and I really enjoyed that. I think it really enriched it for me. I also quite like the idea of telling a real story through the medium of a musical.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was really interesting. And I know plenty of musicals do it, or they use things as reference points, like something like Les Mis. But and I really enjoyed that. I think it really brings color to the story, and also I quite like watching films about real life events and then going away and reading about them. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just a bit of a nerd like that. It's how I always say, you know, if they could have made all my GCSEs or all my exams into films and then I could have watched them, I would have been far more interested.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I quite enjoy that. I quite enjoy viewing history through the prism of films that are representing it and seeing if it is or isn't accurate. There's plenty of other films that do that thing as well. You're mentioning where they perhaps either start with the death of the character or the character is old. If you look at things like Gandhi, that starts with it. A film that I really love, which is Chaplin, about Charlie Chaplin's life. That starts with Charlie Chaplin as an old man and goes back to him being a child and all that sort of thing. And it bookends the film really well, I think. And I think it works really well in this, as well as the musical devices as well. So yeah, that's your question. I didn't mind the songs. They weren't particularly
Weren't
to
the
my
best bit
taste.
for you.
It wasn't the best bit, but they worked in the world of the film. It just wasn't my particular highlight.
No.
But you love them, don't you?
I did love him. I could
Favorite one?
I could
Favourite
probably favorite one. So it's between Oh What a Circus, because I was trying to think of this before recording this so I could have an answer for you, but there's a few of them. It's either Oh What a Circus or, and I don't actually know what this one's called, but I think it might be called Kapow Die when the war starts. And he's like, that's the night that Perron first met Ava. It's that one when there's the military coup.
It's very concept album, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Pink Floyd could have written this.
And what I like about it is that there's been plenty of occasions recently where they've taken something like a concept album and made it into a musical, whereas that's not what they did with this. They made the music and then they wrote the musical around it all together, whereas quite often since things like Mamma Mia have come out, I think plenty of companies and theatre companies and stuff have tried to capitalise on the success of, well, people really, really love ABBA, so let's see what other bands people really, really love, and let's try and make shows out of them. And they don't always work for me. Like one of the most disappointing sort of experiences I ever had watching a film was Rock of Ages, which is the one with like Tom Cruise and Russell Brand in it, and that sort of stuff. I
haven't seen it,
because it's just it's 80s glam rock, and it just doesn't really. The songs are great, but it just doesn't. What they do is they take the songs and they go, let's sort of just write a plot around them.
Yeah.
I went to see a few years ago live American Idiot, so I quite like Green Day. Big fan of that. A big fan of that album as well, which is obviously a concept album from start to finish. And again, they've just loosely written a plot around the concept of the album, and it just doesn't quite work. And I think one needs to inform the other. One of the reasons why Mamma Mia is so successful is, I suppose it was one of the first ones to try and do it, but ABBA is so universally adored and so broad in its taste that most people like it. Like it's like Elton John. I think you'd be hard pressed to find a person in the world who didn't like at least one ABBA song or at least one Elton John song. Are you going to tell me that you don't like ABBA or Elton John now?
I think they're both quality. Don't worry. No, I'm not here to shit on that for you, Josh. I can be a mainstream bitch as well. I know I love Slipknot and System, but no, I'm here for a bit of ABBA.
But I like that about this. You know, as I say, the songs weren't particularly the strongest part of it for me personally, but I like that they informed the plot. And that it was, I mean, the plot is the plot because it's based on real events, isn't it? So I like that the music goes with it. It's not that they've essentially got a line of songs that they've got in mind and then they try to weave a plot around it like that, which I think a lot of things have done. So that was very much to the film's credit. I loved the look and feel of the film as well.
Atmospheric as fuck, innit? Yeah.
Because it's one of those films where I think you take it for granted, where you you realise you're in the world. I know this probably sounds like a really basic point to make, but I think it should be said, which is you get taken into the world of a film, which is the 40s and the 50s, and you're looking at it going, yeah, I'm in the 40s and the 50s, and then you realise that, well, it wasn't made in the 40s and the 50s. And I think you can take it for granted how difficult it can be for a film to show you a authentic feeling period. One of the a TV show I really love, just as a reference point, is The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. And one of the things that does really well is it takes you into the 50s and 60s of New York. And it's been going now, it's in its 4th series, or it might have just finished its 4th series, depending on when this comes out. And I was watching it last night, and I said to my other half, I take this for granted. Like, it looks incredible. And it should never be taken for granted how difficult it is to put a period piece on, because if it's done wrong, it's the first thing you notice.
Oh yeah.
Whereas in this, it's done really well. The cars, the costume, and then the feel, the colorization of the film. I love that a lot of it, specifically in the earlier parts where she's in the poorer part of her life. It looks like it's lit by a natural flame. That sort of thing. Love the colorization of it. I really loved as well. Back to the music question. I loved the score. So I know the score is, it's linked to the songs, isn't it? It's usually just instrumental versions of songs and stuff. But I loved it. I thought it looked and it felt amazing, and I really enjoyed. It really drew me into the world of the film. What did you think about that?
Oh, very good. Oh, yes, of course. Listen, I'm absorbed. I am into this film, hook, line, and sinker. Like, when I'm watching it, I am there. It doesn't matter that I've seen it 30 or 40 times. Gets me every time. Like, it is so atmospheric. You just kind of feel it. You feel the busyness of it. You feel the kind of smokiness of Buenos Aires when she first arrives. Like, when she's on that train, first going to Buenos Aires, and she's waving at the cowboys riding past and stuff. Oh, I just feel like I'm so in it. Let's talk about the cast. So we've got Madonna, who was quite controversially cast as our leading lady, Eva Peron, or Evita. You've got Antonio Banderas just doing a flipping phenomenal job. I love him so much in this. He is my favourite character in this.
He's got a lot to do in this.
He's got so much to do. He is everywhere all the time. I love how he sort of weaves in and out of the characters. Sometimes they can see him, sometimes they pay attention to him, sometimes they don't. He's got a different job every scene depending on where they are. Sometimes he's a barman or a waiter or a concierge or a journalist. And, he's wearing so many different hats. Sometimes he's protesting and he's a rebel and all this. And
I love that.
He's just wonderful.
It's very theatrical, isn't it? Like, to have a chorus and narrator, and that's not something I think that is that easy to do in a film, because I think it might sometimes take people out of the world of the film, whereas when you're in a stage, in a theatre, I think it can work really well. Choruses and stuff go right back to the ancient Greeks and the Romans. I did drama, whatever, no big deal.
And because this is so much about people, like, it's about trying to help people, it's about poor people, it's about lots of groups of people at all times. So there's always a lot of people around to bring you that noise and to sort of lift the momentum and the feeling of each song. So you've got this like really thick, really dense sounding music. Jonathan Pryce as Juan Perón. I do like Jonathan Pryce. Little claim to fame with him. So he went to the same school as my aunt.
What? At the same time?
Yeah, how'd you like that? In Holywell in North Wales.
He's a fantastic actor. So I saw him again. I did drama at uni, no big deal, whatever, it's fine, got a degree. I saw him do the dumb waiter, Harold Pinter play, about 10 years ago. And he was just brilliant.
He's great.
He's captivating, great. Like, whatever. He's played a Bond villain, and I like the Pierce Brosnan Bond films, okay, so a lot of people don't. They're quite polarising in many Bond fans' views. I like them because it's that thing of, they were my Bonds when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So I couldn't wait to see them, wait for them to come out on video and all that sort of thing. So his Bond villain is quite often considered one of the weaker ones.
Oh, yeah.
But I love it. I love his Bond villain because he is so captivating. He always toes the line really well, where he knows when he needs to chew the scenery, where he needs to be seen and not seen. And he's excellent in this. He is very good. So, right to be saying performances. Let's talk about Midge. Let's talk about Madonna. She's in it. She's Eva Peron. She's Evita.
She is.
She fought for the role. It was controversial when she was cast. How do you think she is in this?
So, vocally and dancing wise, physically, she's very, very good. Her acting, I think leaves a lot to be desired. I think she's thinking too much.
Yeah.
And I think she's concentrating too much, possibly on the singing and on the movements,
Yeah.
that she loses a lot in her face. And I don't always find her 100% convincing. This was going to be my dislikes, but we've touched on it now, so we get out of the way, it's fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
In general, so here's the thing. So before I saw this film, this was my first exposure to Madonna. I didn't know who Madonna was before seeing this, so I had no preconceived ideas about her. You know, I didn't have any sort of judgments about her as a performer. But I imagine if you knew Madonna as a singer beforehand, as you would have done, unless you'd been living under a rock for decades, you would maybe find the whole thing a bit jarring, and you wouldn't find it that convincing. It wasn't an issue for me when I was a kid. This time around, a little bit. Like, I noticed it a little bit more. Like, she isn't a great actor, but I can forgive a hell of a lot because the voice on her, I think, is just brilliant. And she looks like her. You know, they've done her up to look like her, but she looks like her.
I'd agree with you. So I'd agree that she isn't the strongest actor. You know, her film career is not the highlight of her
like when
incredibly
Lady
successful career.
Gaga tries to act, isn't it? Now, Lady Gaga's acting is not to my taste, but these people aren't actors. First and foremost, they're singers. They're there because they can sing.
There's very few people that can do it all. And it's not that they can't do it all. It's, I suppose, they can't do it all, you know, they can't do it all well. I do think there was some bits where she was better than other bits. So I did like that towards the end of the film. She does a good job of showing real vulnerability in Eva Peron when she's unfortunately sick.
She gets ill,
and that's not something you associate with Madonna. And I know as an actor, you should be able to do whatever, but people like Madonna are essentially to us as film goers, they are products. So you associate things with Madonna. So one of the reasons why things like Madonna getting cast in this, I think, are controversial is because they do bring with them a certain baggage. It's like when we had Matt on and we talked about Tom Cruise with Jack Reacher. They bring baggage. They're so famous they can't help but bring a baggage.
Of course.
So she probably did bring that to it. And you know, if you went through 100 people and asked them if they associated what words they associated with Madonna, vulnerable and weak would not be them, would they? So I do think she does a good job in some senses, but I completely agree. It's not the strongest part of the film, especially when she's surrounded by lots of excellent performances, particularly, say, Antonio Banderas, who plays a character who's the narrator called Shay, who I believe, you might be able to clear this up for me, in the sort of stage version, he is Che Guevara.
So, yeah, there's kind of conflicting ideas around this. So I have read that too and been aware of that it is meant to be Che Guevara, and he was around like 17 or 18 at the time or something, and he was at like a couple of her speeches. I don't think they ever met, but he was sort of around. But then I've seen other reports that are like, oh no, Shay is just kind of what you might call your mate or your friend or something.
So it's like an everyman name sort of thing.
So it's just like a general description for him. So I don't know. It's kind of like we'll let the audience decide or whatever. If there is any sort of solid facts on that, do let us know, listeners, if you know if that's meant to be Che Guevara or not, or if it's just meant to allude to him, because they've got similar outlooks of wanting to change things politically, haven't they? So it would be like a nice idea of maybe, you know, seeing her inspired him to go and do what he did or whatever, something like that. I want to talk about the extras for a little bit. So obviously there's a hell of a lot of extras in this. You've got army soldiers, you've got, you know, people struggling in poverty, you've got butchers, you've got actors, you've got models, you've got radio advertiser lady things. They're everywhere. And a lot of the time they're doing a really good job. So at the beginning, the part of the opening is you've got this very sort of stripped back, very melancholy version of Don't Cry For Me, Argentina, sort of playing lightly. And there's all these couples dancing together in the street, and they're so full of sadness and grief. You just feel it emanating off them. Like, they don't say anything. They're nameless characters. They're just there dancing with each other in, you know, sort of quite basic dress. You know, none of them sort of look remarkable. I think they're meant to represent the sort of lower classes, if you will.
They're impoverished people, aren't they? They're living close to the poverty line, sort of thing. That was what she was all about, wasn't it? Was empowering,
trying to lift them up,
the working class and the people with less money to be equal. So that's what she was all about, wasn't it?
And I just feel the sadness coming off them, and it just it gets me every time, and there's throughout there's a ton of extras just doing so much, like when they're doing the sort of protest march thing through the town, because they're demanding better, or there's one where they want, so Perron's been imprisoned, sort of, we think wrongly imprisoned, by his enemies, or by the people that he's pissing off.
It's the leaders who see him as a threat, isn't it?
Yeah. And then so they're marching through the streets to free Perron, and there looks like there's thousands of them. I mean, it's probably just hundreds, but it all just feels so full, and the momentum is brilliant, and the pace is great. And just when you think it's slowing down, it doesn't, and a new song like blasts in and just blows your head off, and I just love it. I think it's brilliant. I loved it the first time. I loved it this time.
Okay, so we'll move on to talking about things that we perhaps didn't like about Evita, or that we would change about Evita, the film, not the person. Alice, don't get the impression this is going to be a long list from you, but we'll come to you first. Is there anything, can you find it in your heart to cry for this film?
Yeah, every time. Of course, I will.
Is there anything you would
balanced.
change?
Well, so we've already touched on there, sadly, that I don't think Madonna's strengths lie particularly in her acting, but this isn't something that has ruined it for me or does ruin it for me. It's just something that I can see and I am aware of it.
Yeah.
There's one song, or just kind of like a half song, where Ava sort of runs into or throws out Perron's current mistress. I think when they decide to kind of get together and move together, they go to his quarters. There's a woman there, Andrea Core from the Cause.
I was going to say, isn't it one of the Cause?
She's in the bed, and Ava starts singing to her basically to leave, and it's time to go now. And this is just, I feel like it's a bit clumsy, it's a bit clunky, it kind of ruins the pace a little bit. It just feels a little bit out of place. I know I said before that the pace never stops being awesome, but at that moment it's just a bit like
it's
like you say, it is a little dip, and it's not, it doesn't feel like proper singing. It doesn't feel like they've thought too much about the song. It's just kind of like, oh yeah, let's use this motif that we've already used and throw some words together. It's not a particularly strong moment in it. And the other thing really was, I could have done with more Spanish. Like they put a little bit in there. They put like the odd word, and I think she says like a sentence or two in Spanish. But I could have done with more. Like, use it. You've got it.
So you've mentioned Madonna there. Is there anything else, or is your love for this film just completely outweigh everything else?
Yeah, no, nothing else. Nothing else that I didn't like. A few historical inaccuracies. I think it's not. I'm torn on this because there's not a slide at the beginning saying this is a true story and everything that happens is very true. But some of the things obviously that happened, some of the way that people sort of felt about certain things isn't accurate to how it actually went down. But it's a film, so I don't know if I'm that bothered.
And it doesn't, but like you say, it's not pretending to be true.
No, it's just based on real people.
If it was pretending to be true, you might have an issue with it. But because it's a musical and it's just it's using real life events to inform its narrative, maybe, like you say, it works a little bit rather than, but that didn't happen. Also, they weren't singing all the time as well.
Yeah, exactly. Was it anything for you? Anything else on your list?
So I've touched on a little bit. I thought some of the songs, it's all subjective. They weren't to my taste. I thought some of them were a little boring, a little slow, a lot of ballads in there. Not necessarily to my taste. I enjoyed, of all the songs, the more narrative-y, the more narrative and chorusy songs, ones where it was big groups of people and it was choreographed rather than when it was perhaps just Evita or just Che or whatever. I enjoyed that. It's something that they often do or don't do really well when they adapt something from stage to screen. And from this, you could see how this had worked really well on stage, and you could see that the great effort had been gone to adapt it to the screen. So I thought that really worked. But some of the songs, a little dull for me. Some of the things I thought were a little bit unclear around what actually was going on in terms of, she was a political figure, her husband was a political figure. They're both controversial. If you read about them, she is very much held up as a bit of a martyr and a a very well-loved figure.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe, as with any historical figure, there's two sides to every story.
Of course, and he was basically a dictator.
And
like,
he
that's
was,
how
and he definitely,
recorded.
he definitely was controversial. So I'd perhaps like to have seen more about her early years before she meets Juan Perón, and then a little bit more about, well, why is what she is doing important?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's move on to talking about the critical reception in a moment. Because first, Alice has prepared a little something for us. She's going to take us down the rabbit hole. The rabbit hole this week is Alice singing the entire score and songs from Evita. Get strapped in, here we go. Act
Yes,
1.
we could be a while. Oh, no, we jest, listeners. But maybe if we do a Patreon, that could be a special one time. Who knows? So... Now, this edition of Alice Down the Rabbit Hole involves our home city, Liverpool. Did you know, Josh, that some of the iconic scenes of Evita, where we see her at the palace delivering some of her speeches, were very nearly filmed in Liverpool? They had hoped to film in Buenos Aires itself at the Casa Rosada, but there was one political figure who simply wouldn't allow a film crew anywhere near the residence. And we know that when a film is looking to dive into history, Liverpool is a fine choice indeed due to the architecture. So cast and crew were all set up in and around Liverpool Town Hall, ready to go, about to add to Liverpool's long list of movies filmed here. But just as they were about to yell action, they got the call that a certain someone had actually left Buenos Aires for a couple of days, and if Alan Parker and co could get there before he returned, they could film the required scenes there. So leaving behind anything that wasn't essential, they fled Liverpool and jumped on a flight to Buenos Aires, even leaving some of their props behind, which are rumoured to still be in the town hall. With time stacked against them, they hurriedly filmed what they needed to. This is not widely known info, as they wanted to keep it a secret so as not to piss off the wrong people in the Argentinian government, and that was Alice Down the Rabbit Hole. Now, disclaimer, I actually got that information from a man called Gary Lunt, who runs a film tour here in Liverpool called Real Tours. He tells that story on the tour as we walk past Liverpool Town Hall, and I was captivated, of course, because of course I already loved Evita. So if you're ever in Liverpool, if you're already in Liverpool, check out Gary Lunt's film tours. They're called Real Tours. You can find him on all the social media. There you go, Gary. Little plug for you there.
So let's move on to talking about the critical reception then. Now, I haven't seen this because it's Alice's choice. So, have you got it there for me, Alice?
I have indeed. What are you thinking, Josh?
Where
do you think this sits?
So you've said it's underseen.
And underrated.
Underrated. You've said it's underrated, but that is also informed of the fact that you absolutely love it. So if it got
if it didn't get a 10.
Yeah. So what I think, because this is never up there. If you think about like your most award-winning films, quite often musicals do really well, don't they? Like quite often, if you think of something like more recently La La Land, if you go back to your classic musicals, they do really well. I'm wondering if this got maybe a bit of a lukewarm reception because of some of the stuff you mentioned there. Perhaps Madonna's casting was quite polarizing, and a few other things. Maybe the subject matter itself couldn't get people to see it. I don't know, but I don't think it did. I think it probably did okay. I don't think it was absolutely panned, but I don't think it was an absolute critical success. So let's say let's say 6. Did a 6.
Okay, bang on 6, yeah? Is that where you're sitting?
Yeah, I'm going to say bang on 6. Why not?
Okay, so on IMDb at the time of recording, it gets 6.3. And then over on Rotten Tomatoes, the audience give it a 68 and the critics give it 63. So really similar across the board, like 6.3 and then 63.
Mid 60s.
And then a 68 from the audience. Yeah, so you're averaging out about 6.5, 65 there. This is very easy for me. I do think that is underrated. I know I have the... I've got the nostalgia factor. I watched this when I was very young. It had a very strong emotional impact on me, and that has lasted. But the fact that has lasted, I think, says a lot about it. When I watched it, I was so excited about watching it again. Still, whilst I was watching it, I was still so engaged, and I just fall in love with it all over again every single time. Maybe this film is just really for me, but I think that is proper underrated. I'd give it an 8 easy.
Give it an 8 and it got mid 6. So I've got the casting vote then, have I?
Yeah, go on.
Ooh, it's tough. It is tough that because I'm part of me saying appropriately rated.
Because it's a musical as well, right? So you're already isolating a huge chunk of the audience there.
A
so I get it.
Based on real life events. In a let's be honest, in a country that's not America, the UK, that does cut things out, particularly I think in somewhere like the States. I think I'm gonna say it is underrated.
Okay, thank you.
I'm gonna let you put it in there because
Oh, thank God.
I think it did about a 6, but I would probably give it a 7. I think that it might not necessarily be for me. I wouldn't be in a rush to watch it again, but I was engaged all the way through. I really appreciated the way it was.
To hear that.
I've said what I've said about the songs. That might sound like I thought worse of it than I did, but I didn't. They just weren't to my particular taste.
Yeah.
But that didn't take that much away from the film. I was engaged all the way through. It's really, really well put together, in terms of its direction and stuff. So, and actually, I think it's about some interesting subject matter that
it's a
if
great
it makes
story. It's a great story, right?
If it makes you go away and read about it, I think that's always the success of a film. I think that means a film has engaged you. And I did, I went into this with lower expectations and I came away quite engaged and quite interested to read about the subject matter. So do you know what? For that reason, it's underrated.
Yes.
So there we go. Another one for the underrated vault.
Nice one. Thank you, Josh.
You are welcome.
No idea. I had no idea which way that was going to go, but I have been pleasantly surprised.
Were you sort of waiting for the Emperor's thumb on that one a little bit?
I just thought you were going to be pretty meh. I thought you were going to be pretty meh about it, but I think you were a lot kinder to it.
I was a bit more than meh.
I think you were a bit more than meh. And you know what? That is good enough for me. So, as for next week, what are we going to be watching? It's your turn to pick.
It is
something as good as Evita? Who knows?
Ooh, well, let's see. It's certainly a lot different to Evita.
Okay.
Evita 2, the Evitaing. No. No. Next week, we are going to be watching and digesting Kevin Smith's Jersey Girl.
Oh, interesting. I do like Kevin Smith.
So, well, there you go. Ooh. So, yes, join us next week when we are going to be talking about Jersey Girl. In the meantime, if you'd like to get in touch with us, we are always open to your suggestions. The email address is filmsandthatpod@gmail.com. We're all the social medias, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. Just search for Just Films and That and you will find us. We're also in the corner of your home on the television sets.
On the little box. Yes, we are indeed. So every Friday from 6 p.m, you can find us on the local TV network. So if you live in Birmingham, Bristol, Leeds, Liverpool, or the northeast of England, you can find us on Channel 7 on Freeview. Or if you live in North Wales or South Wales, you can find us on Channel 8 on Freeview. You can also find us on Channel 195 on Sky. So that's every Friday evenings from 6 p.m. and Mondays sometimes as well.
Yes, there we go. You cannot avoid us.
Yes,
we are everywhere.
We are everywhere.
Yes, so in that case, all that remains to be said is join us next week for Jersey Girl, and it's been a pleasure as always, Alice. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, Josh, and thank you for saying Evita's underrated.
You are very welcome. It's goodbye from me. Cheerio.
Bye.